taste of the Earth tells you everything you need to know, long before the satellite imagery uploads to the cloud, and certainly long before the shareholders read the quarterly report. I knelt in the dirt between a row of heirloom Cherokee purple tomatoes and a sprawling patch of crimson clover. The sun was a hammer beating down on the back of my neck with the specific, malignant intensity of a mid-July afternoon in the Kansas corridor. I didn't mind the heat. The heat was honest energy. It was the silence that bothered me. Out here, inside the perimeter of my 10-acre sanctuary, the world was noisy. It was a cacophony of buzzing pollinators, the rustle of leaves transpiring moisture, the subterranean shifting of earthworms processing organic matter. It was the sound of life hustling to survive. But beyond my fence line, silence. A dead, grey, suffocating silence. I reached down and grabbed a handful of my soil. It was dark, almost black, and it held together in a loose, friable clump. It stained my calloused fingers. I brought it to my nose. It smelled of geosmin, that rich, musky scent of healthy bacteria breathing. I touched the tip of my tongue to the dirt. Slightly acidic. Maybe 6.5 pH. Perfect for the nightshades. I looked up. Beyond the wire fence that separated my archaic plot from the future, the fields of Viridian Agritech stretched to the horizon. They were perfectly flat, perfectly laser-leveled, and perfectly dead. Rows of genetically modified corn, the V90 Drought Guard variety, stood like soldiers. They were uniformly 7 feet tall. They were vivid plastic green that didn't exist in nature. And the soil beneath them was a pale, powdery grey dust that shifted in the wind like ash. I stood up, wiping my hands on my overalls. My knees popped. 71 years of gravity were finally starting to win the arguments with my skeleton. I sniffed the air. Underneath the smell of hot asphalt and ozone, I smelled moisture. Not a lot. Just a heavy, localized pressure drop. Rain's coming, I muttered to the tomato plants. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. A meteorologist would tell you there was 0% chance of precipitation. The Viridian Smart Weather app would tell you the humidity was stable. But the app didn't know that the stomata on the underside of the leaves were closing up. The app didn't know the swallows were flying low to catch the insects that were staying close to the ground due to the barometric drop. The earth knew. A low hum broke the silence. It wasn't a tractor. Tractors were obsolete. It was the electric whine of a Tesla Model X approaching up the long gravel driveway. I didn't turn around. I knew who it was. The dust cloud trailing the vehicle told the story. The dust didn't settle. It hung in the air, fine as talcum powder, refusing to fall back to the ground because it had lost its electrostatic charge. It was dead matter. The car door slammed. "Dad, for Christ's sake, it's 102 degrees out here. Get inside." I turned slowly. My son, Michael, stood by his gleaming white car. He was 38, but he looked 50. His hairline was receding, and the stress of corporate quarterly targets had etched deep lines around his eyes. He was wearing a navy blue suit, no tie, and sneakers that cost more than my first tractor. He was the regional director for Viridian, the boy wonder of the ag-tech revolution. "Hello, Mike," I said. "You're tracking dust into the driveway." Michael looked down at his pristine white sneakers. They were coated in a fine layer of grey film. He grimaced and kicked his feet against the tyre. "It's just dust, Dad. It washes off." "It's not dust," I said, walking toward the gate. It's topsoil. Or it used to be. Now it's just crushed rock and chemical residue. It doesn't wash off, Mike. It accumulates. Michael sighed, the long, exasperated sigh of a man dealing with a stubborn child. He opened the gate and walked into my garden. He looked out of place, like a space traveller stepping onto a primitive planet. I don't have time for the lecture today, Dad. I really don't. Then why are you here? I asked. You usually only come when you want me to sign papers. We need the land, Michael said, cutting straight to the chase. He gestured to my 10 acres. The board authorised a new drone hub. We need a central charging station for Sector 4. This is the highest elevation in the county. It's optimal for the wireless grid. No, I said. Dad, listen to me. We're offering 3 times the market value. You can move into the condo in the city. You can stop this. He waved a hand at my chaotic, tangled garden. You're breaking your back for what? A few bushels of ugly tomatoes? We have corn yields up 20% this quarter. We are feeding the world, Dad. You're just playing in the dirt. I laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. Feeding the world, I repeated. Is that what you call it? I walked over to the fence line. I pointed at the endless rows of viridian corn. Look at it, Mike. Really look at it. I see a bumper crop, Michael said, crossing his arms. I see the V90 strain performing exactly as the simulations predicted. The stalks are robust. The chlorophyll content is maximum. I see a hospice ward, I said. Michael rolled his eyes. Here we go. Those plants aren't standing up because they're strong, I said, my voice dropping to the low rumble I used when I used to lecture at the university, back before they stripped my tenure. They're standing up because you pumped them full of synthetic structural lignin. They are stiff, brittle, and the root systems? Shallow. They don't go down, Mike. They go out, because there's nothing down there for them. I reached through the fence and grabbed a handful of the grey dust from the viridian side. I held it out to him. Touch it. Dad, I'm not touching the dirt. Touch it, I barked. Michael flinched. He reached out and touched the grey powder in my palm. It feels like flour, he said. It has no structure, I said. No aggregates, no glomalin. You know what glomalin is, Mike? It's the superglue produced by arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. It holds the soil together. It traps carbon. It holds water. Your soil has 0 glomalin. You killed the fungi with your fungicides. You killed the bacteria with your nitrates. This isn't soil. It's a corpse. You are growing hydroponic corn in a graveyard. Michael pulled his hand away and wiped it on his trousers. The smart soil sensors manage the nutrient profile, he recited, like a brochure. We inject NPK at the root level every 4 hours. The plants get exactly what they need. They get calories, I corrected. They don't get nutrition. There's no micronutrient uptake, no selenium, no magnesium. You're growing empty calories that look like food, and the moment the IV drip stops, the patient dies. The drip won't stop, Michael said, his voice rising. We have redundancy. We have AI monitoring every single stalk. We have beaten nature, Dad. You just can't accept that your methods are obsolete. I looked at the sky. The invisible pressure front was moving in. I could feel the static electricity building on the hair of my arms. Mike, I said quietly, when was the last time you calibrated the sensors? The sensors calibrate automatically, he scoffed. Why? Because the collapse is coming, I said. Michael laughed. The collapse. You've been predicting the big one for 20 years. Ever since you wrote that paper on soil exhaustion. And I was right, I said. I predicted the Dust Bowl of 24. I predicted the Florida citrus die-off. And I'm telling you now, your fields are at the tipping point. The cation exchange capacity of your soil is 0. The salt build-up from that irrigation is locking out the roots. I looked him in the eye. It's going to happen on Tuesday, I said. Michael blinked. He checked his watch. Today is Monday. You think the apocalypse is scheduled for tomorrow? The dew point, I said. There's a high-pressure ridge moving in from the Rockies. It's going to hit the heat dome over the valley tomorrow afternoon. It's going to create a localized humidity spike. Warm, wet air. Normally that's good. But in your fields, you have a dormant pathogen. Fusarium oxysporum, the grey wilt. Michael shook his head. We vaccinated the seeds against Fusarium. You vaccinated them against strain A and B, I said. You didn't vaccinate them against the mutation that thrives in high salinity anaerobic soil. It's been incubating, Mike. Eating the dead organic matter. Waiting for the trigger. The humidity spike tomorrow is the trigger. It's going to bloom. And because your plants have no immune system, because you isolated them from the microbiome, they will have no defense. Michael stared at me. For a second, I saw the fear behind his corporate mask. He remembered, vaguely, that I wasn't just his crazy father. I was William Carver, the man who had revolutionized soil chemistry before the corporations decided that chemistry was too slow and biology was too messy. Then, the mask slid back into place. You're delusional, Michael said. The sensors are all green. Yields are projected at 120%. He turned and walked back to his car. I'm filing the eminent domain paperwork on Thursday, Dad, he called out over his shoulder. We're taking the land. It's for the greater good. Tuesday? I whispered to the wind. Wait until Tuesday. Monday night was suffocating. The air was thick, heavy, and still. The crickets in my garden were screaming, a frantic, rhythmic pulse. They knew. I didn't sleep. I sat on my porch, sharpening my hoe with a whetstone. Shh, shh. I watched the lights of the Viridian facility next door. It was a massive, windowless complex that hummed 24/7. Drones buzzed in and out like angry hornets, carrying payloads of pesticide and liquid fertilizer, treating the fields by moonlight. They were treating the symptoms. They were spraying perfume on a gangrenous leg. Tuesday morning broke with a deceptive beauty. The sun was bright, the sky was clear, but by noon the haze set in. It wasn't smog, it was humidity. The moisture I had smelled yesterday had arrived. The air became sticky. I walked out to the fence line at 1 p.m. I looked at the corn. At 1:05 p.m, the leaves on the nearest stalk curled. It wasn't a slow wilt. It was violent. The turgor pressure inside the plant cells vanished instantly. The bright green leaves turned a dull slate grey. At 1:10 p.m, the stalk next to it buckled. Then the one next to that. It was like watching a wave travel across the ocean. A ripple of grey death moving at the speed of a walking man, spreading outward from the centre of the field. Then the alarm started. A siren wailed from the Viridian facility, a high-pitched digital shriek that meant critical system failure. I pulled my binoculars from my pocket. I looked at the field. The corn wasn't just dying. It was dissolving. The mutated fusarium fungus produced a mycotoxin that dissolved cellulose. It was liquefying the plants from the inside out, turning the bumper crop into a grey, bubbling sludge that dripped onto the dead, salty earth. The smart soil sensors, thousands of little white stakes driven into the ground, were flashing red, a sea of blinking red lights amidst a sea of grey slime. I lowered the binoculars. Nature always bats last, I said. 2 hours later, the Tesla tore up my driveway. It was moving so fast it nearly skidded into the tomato patch. Michael fell out of the car. He wasn't wearing his jacket. His shirt was soaked with sweat. His face was the colour of old parchment. "Dad!" he screamed. He scrambled over the gate, ripping his expensive trousers on the wire. I was sitting on the porch, shelling peas. "Hello, Mike," I said. "You're early." "It's gone," Michael gasped, falling to his knees at the bottom of the porch steps. "It's all gone. Sector 4, Sector 5, the entire valley. The corn, it just melted. The drones, they can't stop it. We sprayed fungicide. We sprayed bleach. It's not stopping." He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a terror that went beyond bankruptcy. "The algorithm," he stammered. "The AI says the soil is non-responsive. It says the biological activity is negative. It says the earth is dead." "I told you," I said, popping a pea into my mouth. "It's a corpse. The necrotizing fasciitis just finally set in." "People are going to starve," Michael whispered. "The grain reserves are low. This was the harvest. If this spreads to the wheat belt, if it jumps to the soy..." He put his head in his hands. "I killed it," he sobbed. "I killed the world." I looked at my son. I saw the arrogance stripped away. I saw the little boy who used to help me catch earthworms after a rainstorm. I set the bowl of peas aside. "Stand up, Michael," I said. He looked up, tears streaking the dust on his face. "What?" "Stand up. We have work to do." I walked past him, heading toward that old tool shed behind the house. "Where are you going?" Michael cried, stumbling after me. "There's nothing to do. The tech failed. The chemical reserves are empty." "We don't need chemicals," I said. I reached the shed. It was built of weathered oak, older than Viridian, older than the internet. I pulled the heavy iron key from my pocket and unlocked the padlock. Inside, it smelled of gasoline and dry earth. But against the back wall, there was something that didn't belong in a tool shed. A massive industrial-grade deep freezer. It was hooked up to a dedicated solar battery array. It had been running, uninterrupted, for 40 years. "What is that?" Michael asked, wiping his eyes. "Insurance," I said. I walked over to the freezer. I brushed the dust off the lid. "In the late 80s, I said, I saw the trend. I saw the shift toward monoculture and chemical dependency. I knew that eventually you would sterilize the soil so completely that nothing could grow back. You would break the chain of life." I unlatched the lid. It hissed as the vacuum seal broke. A cloud of cold vapor rolled out. I reached inside. It wasn't filled with meat. It wasn't filled with ice cream. It was filled with jars. Mason jars. Thousands of them, stacked in neat rows, labelled with dates and locations. Kansas, 1985. Oklahoma, 1987. Nebraska, 1990. "What is this?" Michael whispered, stepping closer. The cold air hit his sweaty face. I pulled out a single jar from the front. It was labelled Prime Loam, Sector 4, Pre-Industrial. I held it up to the light. The dirt inside was black, rich, and frozen in time. This, I said, is the mother culture. I handed the jar to Michael. It was heavy, cold. It contains the full microbiome of this valley before Viridian paved it, I said. Bacteria, fungi, nematodes, protozoa. Billions of dormant organisms that know how to eat rock and turn it into food. They know how to fight fusarium. They know how to heal the wound. Michael stared at the jar. He looked at the dirt as if it were gold. You saved the dirt? He asked. I saved the software, I said. Your hardware is useless without the operating system, Mike. This is the code. It's the only living thing left in this state. But Michael looked at the jar, then at the endless miles of dead fields outside. It's one jar, Dad. We have 10,000 acres of dead soil. How does this help? I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled in years. You're thinking like a factory, Mike, I said. You think in addition. 1 + 1 = 2. I tapped the glass of the jar. Biology multiplies, I said. This isn't a replacement part. It's a starter, like sourdough. If we wake this up, if we feed it, we can brew enough tea to inoculate the whole county by Friday. Michael looked at me. Brew it? Yes, I said. We're going to turn your high-tech fertilizer tanks into the world's biggest compost tea brewers. We're going to stop spraying poison, and we're going to start spraying life. I grabbed a shovel from the wall. Come on, I said. Grab that jar, and don't drop it. If that jar breaks, humanity starves. I walked out of the shed, into the blinding sun. Michael stood there for a second, holding the frozen earth. Then he ran after me. Dad! He shouted. Wait, how do we do it? The board. They'll never authorize unauthorized biological agents. Screw the board, I said, marching toward the fence line. We're not asking for permission. We're responding to a code red. Now get in your Tesla. We're going to your facility. My facility? Michael asked, catching up. They have armed guards. Good, I said. We'll need them to help carry the molasses. I climbed into the passenger seat of the white Tesla. I put my dirty boots on the dashboard. Drive, I said, and turn off the autopilot. You're driving manually today. Michael looked at me. He looked at the jar in his lap. He hit the ignition. The car silently roared to life. We sped toward the grey, dying horizon. The Viridian Agritech Crisis Command Center looked less like a farm office and more like the bridge of a sinking starship. It was a windowless, hermetically sealed amphitheatre of glass and brushed steel, illuminated by the cold blue glow of wall-to-wall data screens. I walked in, my boots leaving small, defiant prints of dried mud on the polished epoxy floor. I clutched the frozen mason jar to my chest like a holy relic. Michael was right behind me, panting, his expensive suit ruined, his face a mask of sweat and terror. Sector 6 is gone, a technician shouted from the pit. Soil liquefaction at 98%. We have structural collapse of the silos. What about the drone fleet? Another voice screamed. Why aren't they spraying? The tanks are empty, and the algorithm locked the flight paths because of visibility issues. In the center of the room, floating in the air like vengeful ghosts, were the holographic projections of the board of directors. They were dialing in from New York, London, and Tokyo. They were giants, 10 feet tall, shimmering with digital artifacts. This is unacceptable, the chairman roared. his pixelated face distorted by rage. Our stock is down 40 points in an hour. Fix it, Michael. Dump the emergency nitrates. Burn the fields if you have to. Just stop the visual spread before the media drones get overhead. Michael stumbled to the center console. He looked small, standing beneath the towering holograms of his masters. We can't, Michael stammered. The nitrates are accelerating the melt. The chemistry is broken. Then find a new chemistry, the chairman screamed. We are paying you millions to manage a cornfield, not a cemetery. I walked past Michael. I walked right up to the central console. I set the mason jar down on the touch-sensitive glass surface. Thud. The sound was heavy, solid. It cut through the digital hysteria. I looked up at the giant, shimmering chairman. Shut up, I said. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the voice of a man who has shouted over diesel engines and thunderstorms for 50 years. It had a frequency that demanded attention. The room went silent. The technicians froze. The board members blinked in their high-resolution feeds. Who is this? The chairman demanded, squinting. Security. Why is there a janitor in the command center? He's not a janitor, Michael whispered, stepping up beside me. He's my father. I don't care if he's the Pope, the chairman spat. Get him out. You have a nitrogen lock, I said, ignoring the threat. I spoke clearly, addressing the room of engineers. You pumped so much synthetic ammonium nitrate into the soil that you acidified the substrate. You dropped the pH below 4.0. I looked around the room. I saw the confusion on their faces. They were coders, not farmers. They knew algorithms, not agronomy. When the pH drops that low, I continued, the bacteria that cycle nutrients die. But the fungi go dormant, unless you starve them. I grabbed a digital stylus from the console. I walked over to a pristine white wall that was being used as a projection screen. Turn this off, I ordered the nearest technician. I can't, sir. That's the livestock feed. Turn it off, I barked. The technician scrambled. The screen went blank. I started drawing. I didn't draw code. I drew a web, a chaotic, tangled network of lines. This is the mycelium, I said, my marker squeaking aggressively. The fungal network. It's the internet of the soil. It connects the roots. It trades sugar for minerals. It produces glomalin, the glue that holds the earth together. I drew a big X over the web. You killed it, I said. Your fungicides, your tillage, your salt-heavy fertilizers. You sterilized the network. So when the Fusarium mutation hit, there were no beneficial fungi to fight back. There was no immune system. The soil isn't just sick. It's having a cytokine storm. It's dissolving itself in a panic reaction. I turned back to the giant holograms. You can't fix this with chemicals, I said. You can't fix it with code. You can only fix it with life. The room was silent. Then a voice came from the far right hologram. It was an elderly man, sitting in a leather chair in a dim room. He hadn't spoken yet. He was watching me with intense, narrowed eyes. That voice, the old man rasped. The lecture style. The diagram. The old man leaned into his camera. William Carver? I looked at the hologram. I recognized him. Vance, the CEO. We'd argued at a conference in Geneva in 1978. He was a junior sales rep for a chemical company then. I was the keynote speaker. Hello, Vance, I said. You look tired. We thought you were dead, Vance whispered. The manifesto you wrote in 78. The myth of NPK. It predicted this. It predicted the soil collapse to the year. I wasn't dead, I said, crossing my arms. I was just composting. You warned us, Vance said, a look of horror dawning on his face. You said if we broke the carbon chain, the dust would swallow us. And here we are, I said. Swallowed. Can you fix it? Vance asked. The arrogance was gone. He was just a terrified old man looking at the profit of his own destruction. We have unlimited resources, Carver. Name your price. We can synthesize whatever antidote you have. You can't synthesize it, I said, tapping the mason jar. This is biology. You can't 3D print a microbiome. You have to grow it. Grow it? Michael asked, looking at the jar. Grow what? We're going to brew tea, I announced. I turned to Michael. I need your irrigation tanks. The big ones. The ones you use for the liquid fertilizer injection. The mixing silos? Michael asked. They hold 50,000 gallons each, but they're full of the proprietary blend. Drain them, I ordered. Flush them with water. No chlorine. Use the well water. And then? And then, I said, we need ingredients. I looked at the lead engineer. I need molasses, unsulfured, about 5,000 gallons. I need fish hydrolysate, and I need manure, composted manure, high fungal content. The engineer looked like he was going to vomit. Manure? Sir, this is a sterile facility. We don't allow pathogens inside the perimeter. It's not a pathogen, you idiot, I shouted. It's an inoculant, and you're going to get it. Call the dairy farms in the next county. Tell them to bring every truck they have. And the jar? Vance asked from the screen. What is in the jar? I picked up the frozen mason jar. The frost was melting, dripping onto the console. This is the starter, I said. This is the seed. We're going to wake it up. We're going to multiply it in the tanks. We're going to create a 50,000 gallon batch of aerated compost tea. A probiotic bomb. And then I pointed at the fleet of grounded drones visible through the observation window. We are going to fly. The next 6 hours were a collision of two worlds. The sterile, white-walled perfection of Viridian agritech was invaded by the messy, stinking reality of agriculture. Tanker trucks arrived carrying manure. The smell wafted into the pristine lobby, causing the receptionist to gag. Barrels of sticky black molasses were rolled across the laboratory floors. I stood on the catwalk, overlooking the massive stainless steel mixing silos. Usually these tanks held crystal clear chemical solutions. Now they looked like cauldrons. Temperature, I shouted down to Michael, who was manning the control panel. 75 degrees Fahrenheit, Michael shouted back. He had taken off his jacket. His sleeves were rolled up. He had dirt on his face. He looked better than he had in years. Air injection. Blowers are at maximum. We're oxygenating the mix. Good, I said. If it goes anaerobic, we breed alcohol and kill the bugs. Keep the bubbles moving. I held the mason jar. The soil inside had thawed. It was a dark, muddy slurry now. I walked to the access hatch of the main silo. I opened the jar. The smell hit me. It didn't smell like rot. It smelled like a forest floor after a rainstorm. It smelled of yeast and earth and deep, ancient life. Ready? I asked. Ready, Michael said. I poured the jar into the swirling vortex of brown liquid below. It was a tiny amount of soil for such a massive tank. A drop in the ocean. But biology is not arithmetic. Biology is exponential. Now we wait, I said. 24 hours. The bacteria will double every 20 minutes. The fungi will wake up and start searching for sugar. By tomorrow morning, this won't be water and dirt. It will be a living soup. The board stayed on the line. They watched us. They didn't understand what we were doing. They saw us dumping mud into their expensive machinery. But they had no other choice. I sat on a folding chair on the catwalk, watching the bubbles rise. Michael sat next to me. "Dad," he asked quietly, "what if it doesn't work? What if the fusarium is too strong?" "Nature seeks balance, Mike," I said. "The fusarium is only strong because there's no competition. We aren't trying to kill it. We're just trying to outnumber it. We're crowding it out at the buffet." He looked at the tank. "I used to think you were crazy," Michael admitted. "Saving jars of dirt, talking to your tomatoes." "I am crazy," I said. "You have to be crazy to love something that doesn't love you back. The soil doesn't care about us, Mike. It doesn't care about your stock price. It just wants to live. If we treat it like a machine, it breaks. If we treat it like a partner, it feeds us." We sat in silence, listening to the hum of the blowers and the gurgle of the resurrecting earth. Dawn broke on Wednesday. The smell coming from the tanks had changed. It was no longer the sharp smell of manure. It was sweet, yeasty, powerful. "It's brewed," I said, checking the foam on the surface. "Load the drones." The engineering team worked with a frantic energy. They pumped the brown liquid into the sleek white sprayer tanks of the drone fleet. The sun rose over the dead grey fields. The sludge had stopped moving, but the ground looked scorched. Nothing grew, not a blade of grass. "Launch sequence initiated," the flight controller announced. "Go," I said. A swarm of 500 drones lifted off the tarmac. The sound was like a giant hive of angry bees. They rose in formation, blotting out the sun. They flew out over the dead sectors. And then they opened the nozzles. They didn't spray a fine chemical mist. They sprayed a thick, dark rain. I watched from the observation deck. The brown rain fell onto the grey sludge. It soaked in. "Keep them flying," I ordered. "Refill and reload. I want complete saturation. Every square inch gets the tea." For 12 hours, the drones flew. They painted the world brown. And then, nothing happened. Thursday came. The fields were wet, dark, and silent. The board started screaming again. "It's not working," Vance shouted from the screen. "There's no green. The satellite infrared shows zero photosynthetic activity." "Give it time," I said, closing my eyes. "The roots have to drink. The fungi have to weave the web." Friday morning. The air was different. The humidity had broken, but the oppressive smell of rot was gone. I walked out of the facility. I walked past the security gates. I walked into the field of Sector 4. My boots sank into the mud. Michael followed me. He was trembling. "Dad," he whispered. "Look." He pointed to the ground near a withered, melted cornstalk. A tiny, serrated green leaf was pushing through the sludge. It wasn't corn. It wasn't soy. It was a dandelion. Michael reached down. "I'll pull it. It's a weed." "Stop." I grabbed his hand. "It's a weed, Dad. It's invasive." "It's a pioneer," I said gently. "Look at it, Mike. It has a taproot. It's drilling down. It's breaking the hard pan. It's pulling calcium up from the subsoil. It's healing the wound." I looked around. There were others. Pigweed, lambsquatter, purslane, the enemy plants. The plants that Viridian had spent billions trying to eradicate. They were popping up everywhere, a green fuzz covering the grey death. "Why weeds?" Michael asked. "Why not the corn?" "Because the corn is weak," I said. The corn needs a babysitter. The weeds? The weeds are survivors. They are the emergency medical technicians of the plant world. They show up when the land is injured. They cover the bare soil to stop the erosion. They feed the microbes. I knelt down. I scooped up a handful of the wet earth. 3 days ago, it had been grey dust. Then it had been toxic sludge. Now, it held together. It was sticky. I brought it to my nose. It smelled sweet. It smelled of gosmin. "Smell it," I said, holding it out to Michael. He leaned in. He inhaled deep. His eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know," Michael whispered. "I didn't know dirt could smell like this." "It's not dirt anymore, son," I said. "It's soil. It's alive." The recovery wasn't instant. The corn crop was lost. You can't unmelt a plant, but the land was saved. By the following week, the slime had dried into a rich crust. The weeds grew tall, fixing nitrogen, pulling the toxins out of the earth. The Viridian stock crashed, but the company didn't fold. They pivoted. They had to. The board called me into the conference room on Monday. Vance was there in person this time. He looked smaller in real life. "We want to hire you," Vance said. "Chief Sustainability Officer. Name your salary. We'll build you a lab. We want to bottle your mother culture and sell it globally." "No," I said. "William, be reasonable," Vance pleaded. "You saved the region. You're a hero. Think of the legacy." "I have a legacy," I said, looking at Michael, who was standing by the window, watching the green weeds sway in the wind. "I don't want your money," I said, "and I don't want you bottling nature. You can't sell the solution, Vance, because the solution is to stop doing what you do. Stop tilling. Stop spraying. Stop trying to dominate the system." I stood up. "I'm going home," I said. "My tomatoes need pruning." "But who will advise us?" Vance asked. "Michael will," I said. Michael turned around. He looked surprised. "Me?" Michael asked. "Dad, I don't know the science like you do." "You know the smell," I said. "That's all you need. You know what dead feels like, and you know what alive feels like. Just keep it alive, Mike." I walked out of the glass building. I walked past the drone pad. I got into my old truck, which Michael had driven down to the facility for me. I drove home. The dust was gone from the air. The sky was a deep, clean blue. I pulled into my driveway. My garden was exploding with life. The bees were working the clover. The heat was heavy, but it was a good heat. I walked to the back porch. I looked out at the horizon. The Viridian fields were no longer grey. They were chaotic, messy green. They looked untamed. They looked beautiful. The phone in my pocket rang. It was probably a reporter, or a publisher wanting to reprint my manifesto. I ignored it. I walked over to the carrot patch. I grabbed the green tops of a Danvers half-long. I pulled. The earth resisted for a moment, then yielded. The carrot popped out. It was bright orange, dusted with dark, healthy soil. I wiped it on my shirt. I took a bite. It was sweet. It tasted of sunlight and rain and patience. "The earth forgives," I whispered to the wind. I looked back toward the high-tech facility in the distance. "But she never forgets," I added. "Don't make her angry again." I sat down on the porch steps. I watched the sun go down. I listened to the crickets start their evening symphony. Finally, the noise of the machine had stopped, and the music of the earth had returned.